Hello, this is Jon Speelman with a video version of my latest column, which is actually 150th in this series. And I've entitled it The Norwegian Bishops, that's bishops plural, New Wood. And we'll come to why I've entitled it that in a moment. So in the previous two columns, I did some Fischer, Karpov and Kasparov games, and I've fast-forwarded it to the present world champion, Magnus Carlsen. And I've said it's always difficult to evaluate a champion at the time, and maybe we overestimate him. When Yasser sent in his list in the comments to one of my columns, which was very kind of Yasser, he went Kasparov, Karpov, Fischer, Carlsen, Anand. And obviously some people thought, what about Alekhine and Capablanca? And I understand that, but I do think the present Bods are very strong players indeed. It's very difficult. And what about Fischer? Why don't you think he's better than Carlsen? Well, yes, it did. I'm not sure actually, which is going to cause trouble. What I would say is that while Magnus has won and then kept the world title for 8 years now, and he's been the world number one for 10 years, he hasn't been that convincing at classical chess, mainly I think because he knew that he'd have a very high probability of winning at rapid play, and he thought, oh, that's good. And then I said, well, whatever you think about his reign, Bobby Fischer held much more dominance over his rivals than the Bods do today. But you can point out, well, that the fact that there's all this technology actually cuts both ways. Fischer would have, of course, used the technology fantastically. But the thing is that nowadays the technology is so much better than the players themselves, at least at calculation, that if you do proper opening preparation with an engine, then a very strong player will be able to do it well, really well, much better than in the past, and probably not really qualitatively worse than the world champion with his Bods, except Carlsen will have better hardware, certainly, and more Bods looking. So it's not that easy. It's very hard to say who's the best. I then said, eventually, after faffing around a bit more, I said Carlsen is good at blitz, and Botvinnik hated blitz, which we know, and that he's one of the small coterie of people. I suppose there are a few hundred in the world who play bullets so well that it looks not like a video game, but well, chess. So Carlsen's a really good tactician. I was looking through what tactical games to give of his. I know I've got more of his. I'll come back to the previous guys. I just started the process rolling with Fischer and Karpov, and we'll certainly come back to them. And he's a wonderful tactician. Actually, I was looking through for tactical games. Well, I was looking for some of the games I've used today, looking for annotations. So I wasn't starting from scratch. I didn't find them actually. And then I saw a very nice game he won against Sipka Ernst, which I don't think I'd ever seen before, being explained by somebody on the net, somebody doing quite a good job. I should remember who, but I don't at this instant. But he's par excellence, he's an endgame player. And there's a very good argument he's the best endgame player ever. I mean, better than Capablanca, say, because Capablanca's opponents were much weaker. You also, actually, one thing I would say is that people like Korchnoi were fantastic at endings, and Kramnik is, but Carlsen is not only good at squeezing, but also at being squozen, or squeezed is a more genuine English word, of course, because I don't think Korchnoi was very good, but he was very good at squeezing people on the good side of a rook ending, but he saw everything his opponent could do on the bad side, which worried him. Carlsen is actually a really good defender as well. He's made himself fantastic at saving bad endings, which he sometimes reaches because he pushes too hard, and often the reason he gets a bad position is because he's trying too hard to win. So I'm going to, excuse me, blow my nose, and then I am going to show you 3 games in which Magnus used the 2 bishops. And that was Speelman Arminatov, which arose in one of them, as part of one of them. So I've got 3 games. By the way, I ought to just go and check that this is recording, because if it isn't, Yeah, it is. Otherwise, I'd be looking very stupid. I'm sorry about the small regression for a second. So it's column 150, and there are 3 of them. So the first one is casting as Michael Adams, and I can't play Mickey nowadays at all. Luke McShane actually told me about this game. I don't know, I must have seen it, but maybe not realised just how wonderful it is. What an impressive game it is by Carlsen. It's from the World Cup in Handyman Cease 2007, and it's a Nimzo Indian. This is one of the main lines. I think more often they go bishop g5 nowadays. In this line, white wins a pawn, but of course black's gained a lot of time. And black just gets his pieces out, and it's still going to take white some time to get organised. He actually goes knight d2 to there, here, knight b3. So he's covering c1 quite nicely. I don't know if you can go knight d5 first. Knight a1 is a very fine move, necessary in this position. Gave it an exclam. It's very aesthetic, but not difficult for the world champion. I don't think I noticed this when I was doing my knights running around the board, did I? I did a column a while ago where I had knights going to as many different corner squares as possible. So what's happened? He didn't go check, presumably because a king d1 doesn't help very much. And while white is getting organised, black is getting pressure. King f2, bishop f5 because it was attacked, knight b3, bishop e6, f6. Mickey's just playing nice moves. I don't know actually, I'm going to give a note, I'm really not sure about this. It blocks the a pawn, but does weaken b6. So I've annotated this game not that hard because I really want to show Carlsen's ideas, all the fantastic ideas he had. And so I don't know if a5 is a good move or not. Blocks the a pawn and creates a possible outpost on b4. Okay, so he went. So what happened was they got to this position. Magnus could easily just have let black play bishop takes bishop. He could have gone bishop takes bishop and knight b3 or something and held his pawn, but he would have been really passive. And he played bishop f1, which is rather a marvellous move, just saying, okay, I don't care, I'm going to give you the pawn back, but play with the 2 bishops. Q1, slightly irritating maybe. I don't know round about here. I'm guessing Mickey could probably round about here with absolute best play have equalised, more or less. Knight, yeah. Engine not that impressed at this point. That's a marvellous move. Knight takes bishop is threatened, and this move prevents knight takes bishop because b6 would be on prise. Really fine move, actually. Very nice. And now he brings his bishop away. What I said, I'm sorry, I didn't get to the end of my introduction, did I? Because I didn't explain the title. And what I said was, Magnus is really good at 2 double bishop endings, and he's good at retreating his bishops to prevent knight takes bishop. And sometimes it looks as though he's created more squares than the board. He retreats so well. So if you had a wooden board, then you could just about stretch this to say the Norwegian bishops knew wood or new forest. But I went for new wood. I went for the beetles rather than the forest in the south of England. Okay, that's a brilliant move, making room for the bishop. I mean, you know, these moves, when they're played, they look normal, but they're not easy to play. Starts being a nuisance, like d6. Bishop g8. g8 looks better to avoid 2m 2b. I'm guessing. I don't know. I mean, it's, as I said, but we get to this position and they do some messing around. Can't play knight takes pawn because if rook takes rook and bishop takes pawn check and bishop takes a5. And bishop d4. He's just keeping his bishops, preventing there's never quite a way that black can get what he wants. d1. Can't play knight takes f4, by the way, because of bishop c5. And king e7 was a mistake. g6 is given by engines. Then you have to move knight f4. And you get to this position, which I don't know. I said white is clearly better. I misspelled clearly, of course, as you do, or as I do, since my typing is so absolutely execrable. Clearly better. But black can still fight. My feeling is that the prelates normally nobble the horses in the end, but it would still have been a contest. That's my feeling. I don't like playing with knights against bishops. By the way, there was a line somewhere around here. g6, g4, knight fe7, bishop c4. And it's obviously white has pins and it's unpleasant. But actually the engine just says this is winning, which is a bit of a surprise to me. I gave some line like this. And as you trot up to go play king e4, you have to lose your rook. I mean, obviously that's far too far for a person to see it all accurately, but you could guess that the pins were unpleasant. So what happened was they got this ending. And now that you've won a pawn, it's probably just lost because bishop f8 is happening in lots of positions as well. And Carlsen kept on fighting. Adams managed to make quite a lot of trouble. Well done. Very well done to make any trouble at all, really. Now, if knight takes bishop, bishop takes b2, knight c7, you go check in there. And you're going to win, clearly. It's going to be a bit of a fight, but not a very enjoyable one. If you move the g pawn, I guess you can go g6 or knight e8 might be the best. Then let's just bring the king in, shall we? Bishop b4, says the engine, obviously is good, but king f4 must win as well, surely. King here, king here, king takes, king there. You're even threatening to win the knight now, so you have to go check. And obviously white wins easily. So they got to this position, and now it's just a single ending, but knights are bad against pawns on the rim. Black can't ever take that pawn, and with a little bit of fiddling, Carlsen was able to win. And by now it's easy enough that any good grandmaster could win this position. It doesn't have to be Magnus. So a very brilliant game by Carlsen, in which the really nice moves were rook b1, bishop b1, king g1 and bishop f2, all going backwards to keep out of the range of the knights and then springing forward along the diagonals. That was one of them. Then the next one I had was against Nakamura, a very famous game from London 2015. Now this game, I had it in my database annotated, but I'd redone it myself and put my name on it. I'm afraid I don't know who did it, but I know they're a bloody strong player. Could be something like Peter Svidler, I'm guessing, because their English is very good indeed, and their annotations are extremely to the point. And I've added a bit myself and a few lines here and there. So this is a game where Carlsen managed to get these guys. I don't know if knight fd7 was a particularly good move. Sorry, I've tried. It had a complete time record, which really annoyed me actually, of every move, because it sort of gets in between reading the moves. And he went e4 here, which is interesting. It is opening the position, which is what you want to do, but it's rather early. and actually he castled here, and knight takes d4, bishop b3, knight c6, queen b3, gives white plenty of play for the pawn, but very possibly not the advantage, and possibly not the advantage as such. Well, that's what my engine says against accurate defense. And the thing is that it's a very hard thing to do, but when you don't do it, you're leaving yourself with a somewhat grim position. Because now d5 smashes it open, bishop c5, knight c3. I was really interested. My gives white plenty. Yeah, it's quite a pleasant position for white, who has the bishop pair. Yeah, that's what I think. The funny thing is that in principle, I think I'd have wanted to keep the queens on here. Yeah, he went queen f6 now. And let's me rewrite principle. I'm sorry there's so much faffing. I could obviously just leave some typos. Principle, God. Princip. And the interesting thing is that, yeah, I mean, Nakamura decided now to take on c3 and give white bad pawns, but now Carlsen plays marvellously as he does. Can't take an a2, of course, because of rook a1. I suppose I should say that, shouldn't I? Knight a2, question mark, bishop c6, bc6, rook a1. So actually we'll give it 2 question marks. In fact, because it is a gross and horrible blunder which Nakamura would never make in his life or the next one, and wouldn't make it bullet, by the way. So they played some moves and fiddled around a bit. Carlsen managed to keep his bishops just, as he does. He's really good at it. And they swapped off to this ending. And this ending is very grim. Now there are some really interesting points here. Carlsen didn't like f4 because he thought he might have been able to use this square for the bishop or the king. And it's really hard to tell. I mean, you know, what are you going to do? You're going to play king c4 and bishop f4 or something? Or I don't know. It looks natural to me, but now... And this, yeah, stops the king going to e6. And now a6 played, and the unknown annotator says, well, that's weakening. And I agree, but it's really, really hard to tell. You think, I'm going to leave my knight on c6 forever and it'll be okay. But against Magnus, forever is not as long as you think. This is rather marvellous. All the time he's fiddling around, getting an h6. Well done. So, you know, it's just deeply, deeply unpleasant. There was a moment later when Nakamura could have drawn. You don't take now on b7 because then this is just a draw. That would have been very silly, so he just keeps going merrily. b1, another nice square. Board's big enough the horses can't chase him. f6. The annotator doesn't like f6. I agree, f6 is weakening, but it's really hard to play these positions. You think, oh, I'm on f5 and I'm giving myself a possible square on e5, and you know, you have to make a decision each move. The thing is that, you know, we're looking at this with an engine, and none of our decisions are irrevocable. If we play a bad move, we say, oh dear, let's play another one. Poor Nakamura is having to play a lot of very difficult moves when he really isn't sure what's right. And eventually he goes wrong. So that was dubious. And now Carlsen spent some time on this because he wanted to reach the time control. I think knight f5 check, king to there, knight to d4, c6 is just over. Very true. This great move. Now knight takes c5. Used up almost all of his remaining time to do this. If he got knight takes c5, then he'd certainly have, at the very best, got a knight against two bishops, which should be losing. So he took the bishop, and now this brilliant idea, f6. Here Carlsen got it slightly wrong. c6 was the way to go, actually. c6 would have won. Carlsen thought he'd be winning anyway, but c6, and basically you're not in time to get organised, and you go down. If you went king to d8, why wouldn't you go king d8? Because presumably king how do you do this? Let me ask the great engine itself. King e5, king c7. Still, can you take? Oh, you probably can take now, yeah. Knight b4, king d4, and you're driving him away. And this is not that obvious. I mean, you don't know. I'm asking an engine. The bishop is very good actually on a6. It's killing the knight a bit. So now do we go bishop b5 or do we go bishop b2? They probably both win, do they? And he's not quite managing to get, and eventually. Come on, oh great and glorious bishop, please. Are you going to? Yeah, you are going to do that. Okay. But that was the way to do it, because after f6 there was a draw after a5, a4, king f7. Check. He went king f8, king g6, which is difficult. You might see in the game c6 takes here, and White's problem is Carlsen thought he should be winning, but once the knight gets to b2, you can temporize, and nothing basically happens. So here. And if White goes to take the a pawn, then you're going to be in time to play knight takes a. Yeah, I don't know if this is the only move, but it's a good one. And now we just sit here, because if he goes away from the f pawn, we can play knight takes a4, and if he sits with the e pawn, we can just sit around, play king to f8 to e8, and if that's not legal, the bishop's in b5, just fiddle around with the knight and put it back on b2. So that is a draw. So that was maybe the only mistake that Carlsen made this game, and now it's winning again. c6 check here, take bishop b3, and it's just winning for White because of the two pawns. It's not so obvious, but I suppose it is. King f7, a3, bishop b3, king e8, king to there, and basically you're just getting in. You can just go and take the knight for the c pawn, and then your bishop is both protecting the f6 pawn and stopping the a3 pawn from advancing. So, and he resigned, because now once that's gone, that's the end of that. You can try, let's see, c4 check. I mean, this is a reasonable line. And that's that. So, a very fine game by Carlsen indeed. And again, are all those bishop retreats, like bishop, all fiddling around, and bishop b1 was one of them, just getting out of the way of the knights. Very impressive game. Very unpleasant, obviously, for Nakamura, who never had a sniff. The last game I've got is a game Ding against Carlsen, so we'll turn the board round. It's a Catalan where Carlsen played one of the newfangled ideas, b5. You don't go knight e5 here because of queen d4. Is at least okay for black. That was my reaction the first time I saw this. I think against Marcus Harvey, and I was lucky to draw. He went knight d5. Actually, now b3 actually is quite a fun line. b3, queen c4, bishop a6, queen takes pawn c6. I had this in a game against Arnatov in the European Club Cup, and I gave the pawn back. I managed to win, but it was basically, there was a bit of a bluff at one moment. I saw this move. I sort of saw knight e6 was wrong, but I actually didn't see that I was lucky not to get my rook trapped, which is a bit disgraceful. Because in this position, after knight e6, in this position, rook takes bishop and knight c5 would win. Here there isn't rook takes bishop, obviously, and this is quite okay for white, but after knight d3, rook d7, take bishop, take bishop c7. Okay, white has more than enough play with the rook on the 7th and everything, but it's not a winning position or anything. It should end in a draw. So, but in fact, what happened was that my opponent believed me. You should never believe your opponent, and I actually splatted him after that because, well, I've got too much space. He could have defended a bit better, but it was lost anyway. Okay, so that was a game, which is faintly relevant, in fact. Carlsen played a novelty, bishop a6, a novelty at the time. I think they played bishop takes c5 before. And the thing that's happening is the white can play c6, but it gets pinned. And black is able to fiddle around. Rook d1, d4 is also interesting. Bishop f3, knight e6, bishop e5. This is some game, is it? Presumably. Looks okay for black, doesn't it? Looks very okay for black. This must be queen d4, bishop b2. Okay, I can believe that's equal because the knight is so terrible on b1. We might as well continue this, I suppose. Queen takes pawn, bishop b2, queen takes, rook takes, rook, presumably rook takes, knight d2. Oh, f4. I was thinking I could do f4. So basically what's going to happen, so why don't you go knight c7 here? I suppose you go king f2 then. Yeah, this must be at least equal for black with that knight so absolutely awful on b1. Anyway, what actually happened was that he went c7 in this position, ding, and they played some moves. Oh, also there was a game with rook d1, bishop c4, which was fun, which happened in the Russian Championship recently. I think I'd analysed queen e8, which is a perfectly reasonable move, actually. And this happened in the game. What's happening? No, this is... That's right, this was this game. And white got a winning attack. This was Predka against somebody in the Russian Championship, the first league. Anyway, they got their pieces out, and Magnus won his pawn back, was a little bit loose, and at some point this started to go all wrong for white. I mean, you can't take in c4 at the moment because of pawn takes, which is unpleasant. And the engine is claiming it's still okay, but doesn't feel it to me. I don't like playing against two bishops at all. And somewhere around about here, I think knight a5, bishop d3. It's claiming it's equal, but I don't believe it. I understand the knight can hassle the pawns, but the two bishops are always better, surely. Now the reason I gave this game really was this fantastic move, getting out of the way. There's some problem that white's trying to gain a tempo with king d4, I think, and some variations. And by moving the bishop out of the way, you prevent king d4. Actually, you can play this, but it's not. This is certainly better. So what happened was that Magnus now fixed a weakness on h2. Knight a5, a5, h5, says the engine. And it's just really unpleasant. I mean, it may be playable just about. This is claimed to be equal, is it? Right. Well, I mean, okay, there are going to be lines. The thing is, in a position like this, there are probably going to be ways to defend with the bishop and the knight, but in practice, you don't find them. You went here. No need to rush at the moment. Obviously, you don't want to get your bishop trapped yet. Obviously, don't swap the bishops ever in this life or the next. Took it and played h4. And his bishop comes out, and the two bishops and the passed pawn win. It's always the case that a passed pawn and two bishops are going to win, really. Just ain't going to be possible. He's puddling around h5. At some point you have to do something before the king comes in, I suppose. But he doesn't even bother about it, because the thing is, those bishops, they make enemy passed pawns look ridiculous. Now, okay, you can't take on b3 at the moment, obviously, but he doesn't even play bishop. Well, he can't play bishop takes b3 maybe, but takes this one, and now the knight is trapped because knight c5, bishop b6. So he resigned, and bishop d5. What do we play? Well, we could just play bishop takes knight and king takes pawn and win that one easily, because we're easily going to win with the three pawns. So another very fine game by Carlsen, and the move I really liked in this game was bishop g8. So he's really good with the two bishops, and we sort of knew that, and we know that a bit more now. And what I'm intending to do is to carry on with Carlsen next time, but have some blood pudding, which, as I pointed out, is actually just a sausage. I'm a veggie, so it isn't my thing, but it sounds good after the preliminary action of the bishop's wood. Right, well, I hope you've enjoyed these rather splendid games in which Carlsen has been so delicate. I probably haven't had time really to do it quite enough, have I, to really show. I think what was happening was that if you had time to play king d4 and bishop d5, then that was going to be a big nuisance. But by moving the bishop first, you never quite had time to do what you wanted. And there we are. I'm going to stop now, and I hope to see you next time. I hope you enjoyed this.